we're going to be covering all 12 teams in the final year of the Pac-12. And let's get this off. Let's get this ball rolling. So I'm going to start off with my Oregon State Beavs. All right. If you watched my last video, kind of breaking down the conferences breakdown and the Beavs, my positivity about the 2023 season, I mean, it's real. You see them ranked at 18, and I think both the coaches and the AP poll. So the hype around them is pretty real. And I think their ceiling is winning the conference. The two games that I got highlighted are Washington and then Oregon. They're going to host Washington and then they're going to travel to Eugene for the Civil War. And so if the Beavs can win two of those and take care or go 1-1 for those two games and take care of the Utes at home on a Friday night, I think they could go 11-1, 10-2. I think they're a legitimate contender. They fixed their main issue, and on paper, they got the best O-line in the conference. You know, they got two first team and I think one second team for their line. So that's really incredible. Returning a lot of starters. Definitely the room they're most excited about. And then Aiden Childs could end up taking that job from DJ. That's kind of what I've been hearing. Damian Martinez also early preseason favorite for first team running back. It's him and Bucky Irving, I believe. So, yeah, a lot of reasons to be hyped about Oregon State. And I talked about this last episode. I think that 8.5 is still disrespectful. So I'm taking the over on that. I do think the research is there. It's not just me being biased. And I think their schedule is pretty favorable. They do get Utah and Washington at home, and they avoid playing USC. So that's huge. And hopefully they'll see USC for the conference championship in Vegas. So hopefully the Beavs can really stick it to them, man. I think the whole country would like that. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, Jonathan Smith is looking to do some serious damage. I think the ceiling for the Beavs is a New York 6 game or a playoff appearance. I'm really high on them, really high on their defense, really high on what defensive coordinator Bray has done. And the quarterback's situation is the best it's been. So there's a lot of hype in Corvallis, and maybe for the first time, a little bit of pressure. Leaving the conference, they really got to make a statement their final year in the Pac-12, and they never won the North or anything, so maybe they can get to the championship game and really get the national eye as all these conference realignment stuff is going on. So that's my breakdown of the Beavs. Again, if you want to watch my video exclusively really breaking them down, I have like a 20-minute on that. So go Beavs. Yeah, they would be my long shot pick to win the conference for sure. Y'all know about the other 4 teams, but the Beavs are really legit, and that 8.5 number is too low. And the only other team with the 8.5, I believe, is Utah. So take the over on the Beavs for sure. Moving on to the Ducks. This is an incredible team. They're building off of a lot. Obviously, you got to start with Dan Lanning and Bo Nix. Dan Lanning has done a great job continuing the recruiting that Mario Cristobal really put in place. The thing about the Ducks this year is their schedule is tough. Unlike the Beavs, they have a lot of challenges on the road. Starting off with week 2, they're going to Lubbock. Texas Tech is not ranked yet, but I'd imagine, at least not in the AP, maybe in the coaches, they're in the lower 20s. So I believe they will be ranked by that game. It's going to be fantastic to watch. You're going to see Shaw go against his former team. So maybe a little revenge opportunity for that. Definitely a losable game for the Ducks, but I think they could win. I think they should win. And I think it's a chance for Bo Nix to get the ball rolling. And I know him and a lot of Ducks fans feel like if he had been healthy, maybe it would be a different season, you know? Maybe they would have taken care of Washington and the Beavs, and then who's to say they didn't belong in playoff. I mean, maybe that Georgia game would dissuade a lot of people, but who's to say, really? Who's to say? So there's that for sure. Big on Bucky Irving. Trayshawn Holden transferred. I know they're hype on another big recruit that they got going. Whittington is still there, but the Ducks blew a lot of close games. Obviously, Georgia was not close. That was Lanning's first game as a head coach for the Ducks. Every other game, it seemed like they really should have won, honestly. I know the Beavs. I love the Beavs. Ducks probably should have pulled that out. Some very questionable fourth downs. Washington, they really had a lead and kind of blew it. Um, that was kind of an unacceptable loss. And yeah, I mean, those two games really kind of ruined their season. So yeah, I know the Utes are going to be looking for revenge, and the Ducks are going to Rice Eccles. The Ducks are probably the one team who could end Utah's streak of home games. That's definitely something to highlight for the Ducks, though, is that's probably one game that they will for sure be underdogs. You never know how it's going to go. Um, they do get to host the Trojans. We'll see. They might be underdogs that game as well. But I mean, maybe them being in Eugene will allow them to have it be even or them be favored. Bo Nix is clearly a Heisman contender. He got left out of the first and second teams preseason, but he got an honorable mention. Definitely could be first team. I would not be shocked. He needs to stay healthy. He needs to run the ball effectively and efficiently and keep plays alive with his feet. And I mean, Bucky Irving is always going to be a great option out of the backfield. So they have a very tough schedule, but I think they could pull it off. I really think the Ducks have one of the highest ceilings in the conference. They're a pure contender, and which brings up kind of the tier list. I kind of wanted to get the Beavs out of the way because I didn't want y'all thinking this was only going to be about the Beavs. But the Beavs are in that top tier. You know, the Beavs, the Ducks, the Huskies, the Utes, and the Trojans are the teams that I think one of them is going to win the conference. And I think any one of them could represent the conference in a playoff, or maybe a couple of them to represent the conference in a New Year's Six type situation. So those are the five premier quarterbacks too. I mean, there is Ward and there is Delora who really aren't far behind, and Sanders coming into Colorado. But I think those are really the dominant quarterbacks who have been doing it for a while and have had all of them coming off great seasons. I mean, the exception of the Beavs, I suppose, but DJ coming in is still a 5-star, and he really doesn't have that much to do. Um, so yeah, and that kind of next tier I have the Bruins, the Wildcats, and the Cougars. All of them, I think, could kind of take some teams by surprise, pull off a couple upsets. UCLA's number is significantly higher than Arizona's and Wazoo's. They're at 8.5. I definitely think that over could hit. We'll see how Dante Moore does. I know that he's a big heralded recruit, so we'll see that. But those are my kind of next tier. Um, Arizona at 5, that over is pretty good. Same with Wazoo at 6.5. I mean, they have a 7-year consecutive bowl streak. And then at the bottom of the conference, I have Arizona State, Colorado, Cal, and Stanford. ASU, Cal, and Stanford. I mean, Cal, Wilcox is on the hot seat. I'll go into that further. Stanford and ASU got first-year coaches, and so does Colorado. I mean, obviously, Colorado has a lot more to love with the transfer portal and with the name that Deion Sanders is, but I'm not super high on them this year. They need to prove it to me. I will be watching them against TCU. But if they don't show me something I like, I think you can maybe forget about them until maybe the second half of the season when they start uniting a little bit more and Dion's really starting to build. So I'd say kind of forget about those teams. Um, Colorado has a more interesting narrative. Um, Wilcox needs to save his job. I don't know if he will. And yeah, so those are kind of the tier lists. And then, yeah, so that's kind of my breakdown of the first teams I already did in the state of Oregon. I I want to say that one of them for sure is gonna play in the conference championship game. The Civil War will determine one representative in that game from the Pac 12. It's not North South anymore. I think it will be North South. I don't know. Maybe Washington gets a rematch against one of those two teams. Um, USC could end up having a couple losses, but one of them being out of conference to Notre Dame. Um, I don't see UCLA or Arizona. Obviously, Utah should definitely be considered, but they did lose a little bit. But yeah, Oregon State or Oregon, I think at least one of them will represent the Pac 12. Monumental Civil War. It is at Eugene this year. Still a super close game. I would like to have it at Corvallis. Um, Bo Nix. That could be a. Well, no, it is a Friday too, darn it. That could be a potential Bo Nix sealing his Heisman campaign. So, yep, a lot to look forward to if you're a fan of either the Beavers or the Ducks. Obviously, the Ducks feel like kind of villains for leaving, but whatever. I'm gonna be honest. I love Bo Nix. I think Lanning is a good job. They did good with him, and the defense looked a lot better. My key with the Ducks is they're gonna have to pull off some of those clutch games, and they're gonna have to probably go 2-1 against Tech, UW, and Utah. Those are all on the road, and they got to go 2-1 in those three games in order for them to really make a splash. I think they will. I don't think they'll beat Utah. I think they should beat Tech and Washington though. So that's my breakdown on the Ducks. Moving on, everybody's hipster pick. I mean, other than the Bees, who are super hipster, I guess, but the hipster pick is the Huskies. They do have probably the best defensive player in the Pac 12 in Braylon Trice. And this guy is an absolute monster up front. He's getting some buzz for being an All American, and he's a true disruptor. We all know how much true disruptors can change games. So that will be big for Washington, and he will be really fun to watch because he can really get after the QB. Um, so yeah, and then obviously on the other side of the football, they got second team preseason Pac-12 quarterback Michael Penix. Michael Penix has an amazing arm, can do a lot with his legs. He runs that intricate offense pretty well, um, and he loves throwing it to McMillan. So that will be super fun to watch. Is Michael Penix to McMillan? They were, I think, like a top 15, maybe top 10 offense last year. They really put up really good numbers, 38 or something a game. Great offense. I imagine it will continue. Penix will get a lot of great stats. I think he's a good bet for the Heisman as well. Um, the one thing I want to talk about with Washington is this is one of my preseason early lines I took. Not an over under, but just betting on the game. I took Boise State with 14 and a half. I I'm not buying in on the Washington hype as much as anyone else. I mean, they could still definitely win the conference. I'll acknowledge that. DeBert has done a really good job. I'm not completely buying in though, and I think 14 and a half, even though it is in Seattle, is a little too much for a quality team like Boise State, and especially they really turned around their second half of the season. So that's a game I'll be super excited for. And if Washington does prove me wrong and does cover that 14 and a half and really dominate at home, a quality opponent like Boise State, then I think they could be very, very legit. Um, they do go to Corvallis and they go to the Coliseum. Could they go 0-2 those games and still win the conference? maybe, maybe. They would have to beat Utah. So that would be the one thing. If they go 0-2 in that, though, you can kind of X out any chances at them making a national championship. They would have to win the conference to do a New Year's Six. Obviously, a two-loss Pac-12 team really isn't going to get in unless something crazy happens, and it would probably have to be SC, maybe the Ducks. So that's just Washington. You got to go 1-1 if you really think the sky is the limit. Basically, the Beavs at 8.5, the Ducks at 9.5, Washington at 9.5, Utah at 8.5, and USC at 10, and UCLA at 8.5 for that matter too. All those teams, those 5 contenders in that top tier, have pretty big numbers. Washington is at 9.5. I think that under could definitely hit. You lose those 2 games on the road that we're talking about, and then who knows who else could beat you? I mean, I'm pretty high on Washington State. I just think there's a lot of opportunities that Washington could lose. Maybe they'll lose to Utah. That is a home game. So, yeah, I mean, even Boise. So, I mean, that 9.5, I'm definitely not going to play the over. Same with Oregon, even though I would be a little more confident in the Ducks hitting it just because I have a slightly more confidence in Bo Nix. Maybe his ceiling isn't as high as Penix with that offense they run, but I have more confidence in Bo Nix on a game-to-game basis, showing up and balling out. They do have that tough slate with Tech, UW, and Utah all on the road, but that Oregon over, more likely, if I had to take one under amongst those 5, it probably would be Washington, maybe USC. So I'm not as high on Washington as anyone else, but I would be a fool not to say they're a contender. One weakness they had last year is, I mean, they didn't do as well in the red zone as they should have. Maybe it's because it's such a passing attack. And they also are going to lose a couple. They have 3 new starters on the O-line. So that'll be big. They got to protect Penix. But, I mean, they have a lot of confidence that the offense should improve. And it's getting more and more intricate from what I hear. So they'll be a fun team to watch, hands down. And Penix should put up some amazing numbers. So that's my take on Washington. I think they're a very quality team and for sure a contender. Do I think they will win the conference? No. Do I think they will cause some trouble, wreak some havoc, maybe beat Utah? Yes. Yes, they're a tough game that everyone should circle. Super excited to see them play the Beavs and the Ducks, though, because that's how their season's going to shape out. And the Trojans. And then after Washington, another team that I'm going to break down is the Utes in that top tier. Obviously, they're in that top tier. They should be in everybody's top tier. Their number is the same as Oregon State's, which I think is a little bit disrespectful as well. The one reason why I get it is because they do have a way harder non-conference schedule, particularly the game at Waco on September 9th. I have heard that Rising should be good to go for that game. He'll have a little extra time because he opens at home. Florida's on a Thursday, right? So he'll have a little more than a week, I believe. Should have a decent time, but I honestly think that the Utes can beat the Gators at Rice Eccles. They probably wouldn't cover that +8 or -8, I believe. But I still think they would win because that's how much I trust Kyle Whittingham and those boys at home. So, courtesy of Shmuley, too, I'm going to read the stat on the Utes, right? And this was absolutely insane, is other than COVID, they haven't lost at home since Jake Browning was on the Huskies. Jake Browning, Chris Peterson-led Huskies was the last team to beat Utah at home. The one team that could do it, that I mentioned before, definitely the Ducks. But I mean, I don't think the Gators can, even without Rising. That being said, at Waco, if Rising isn't good to go, or if he's a little shaky for that first game, I definitely think Dave Aranda, Blake Shapen, and the Baylor Bears could pull off that game. It's a hard place to play. Sometimes the Pac 12 teams do not do well for those early morning kickoffs. And it'll be a game that they got to take seriously. Having Florida and Baylor back to back is no joke. And I have tremendous respect for Dave Aranda. I know that they didn't have the best season last year, but I mean, watching him at Whittingham go at it will be a fun game to watch. Definitely crucial that Rising is healthy for that game. So that's kind of why I'm a little not super gun ho on taking that Utah over with the 8.5. Um, their schedule's really tough. The flip side of the coin on them probably winning every game at home again is a lot of their challenges are on the road. Obviously, I mentioned Baylor. They go to LA, and obviously, I mean the Coliseum, right? Not Pasadena. So the Trojans are pissed after last year. I don't consider Lincoln Riley a legitimate coach if he can't beat the U. I'm just gonna say it right now. I don't consider Lincoln legit if he can't beat the Utes after the Utes beat him twice last year, and he gets them at home. Um, that's all I'm gonna say. I think Utah might lose just because of that motivation, and then they obviously go to Seattle. So on top of at Waco, at the Coliseum, at Seattle, they go to Corvallis on a Friday night. Yikes! I definitely don't think they'll win that game. Um, they lost in Corvallis last time they went there, and that was the only loss I think they had in the conference. Um, and Oregon State, the only team that really dominated them last year was Utah. So the two teams that really want revenge are the Beavers and the Trojans. And the Beavers actually have a quarterback this year. They're really good at home. I expect them to win. So you're looking at between Baylor, USC, and UW. Utah has to go 2-2. I think they could for sure amongst those four games, and then take care of business at home. And then you're looking at them maybe representing the South and playing the Oregon State Oregon winner. That's kind of my prediction. If they don't go 2-2, then it'll probably be USC, maybe Washington. So I think Utah's schedule is not favorable. Baylor, I guess, doesn't have conference implications, so that's a good thing. But I mean, with Utah at this point, they are looking to get over the hump not only in the Pac 12, but to finally win a New Year's Six game. So yeah, I think you should be reasonably optimistic that the U gets into another New Year's Six game. I know the media loves them at this point, and Coach Witt. Um, I love the job that Andy Ludwig has done. I will say the defense, kind of similar to Alabama over the last few years, feels like it's lost the tenacity slightly. I know Cole Bishop is going to be, he's a preseason first team all defense for sure. The running back room, I'm never going to doubt. I think Jackson could have an incredible year. Health is obviously a concern. The health of Cameron Rising is insanely important. I can't get over that. And yeah, so Scally needs to step it up in my mind. I think with with the changes in the program and them coming back to back, I think that the one limiting factor is the offense has taken that step up, but the defense seems like it has had that kind of tug of war factor. Brant Keithy, though, definitely one of the best tight ends in the country. There's no doubt he might get a little overshadowed by Brock Bowers. He's definitely a stud. I expect him to be doing some stuff like Brock Bowers with the H-back. I know Ludwig's very creative at getting his playmakers involved. Wide receiver room, once again, is a little weak. We'll see how it does. And yeah, the defense is losing Clark Phillips, but they still got Bishop. So defense, I'm also not worried about. But I am a little bit because it has been getting worse. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing. Yeah, but Utah needs to take care of business on the road. Take care of business at Waco. Very tough game. Very underrated if you're a Utah fan. Cameron Rising needs to be healthy. Other than that, I think the Utes can look forward to another great year. Will they win the conference again? I don't think so. Definitely could represent. But I mean, to say they're only going to win 8 games, I feel like would be a little, yeah, that's a little insulting because they're back to back conference champs. Like Whittingham wins games. It's just a fact. So moving on from Utah, we're going to the team that they absolutely ruined, the USC Trojans. And USC is bringing back Heisman winner Caleb Williams. They're losing Jordan Addison. I'd like to talk about Eric Gentry. Um, he's tall as hell. His arms are insanely long. He's kind of a freak. Kind of like a Perkins type disruptor, not as good. He had some key plays in some big games, but from what I've heard, it seems like Gentry is pretty raw and undeveloped. Um, so maybe he can turn this season into something. And I think he was preseason second team. I wouldn't be surprised if he rose to first team. But let's talk about the USC defense. I don't need to get into Lincoln Riley and offense and Caleb Williams. If you're watching this channel, you probably know that they're legit. However, I would like to talk about Alex Grinch. He's been with Riley a lot. I mean, he is very used to coordinating alongside a team that plays the air raid. Um, but here's my take: the Grinch will not steal Christmas this year. Okay? USC's turnover margin last year was absolutely ridiculous. I think turnovers definitely can be coached. Kirby Smart does a great job, but at the same time, turnovers are kind of a fortune, luck of the draw type thing a lot of the time. Um, I don't see them getting that level of turnovers. They did kind of do well in the transfer portal. They do have the talent on paper that competes with anybody really in the country. They do have that blue chip ratio. Um, so that's huge. And they benefit from having a really, really easy schedule to start the season. San Jose State, Nevada, and Stanford all at home. Then they go to Tempe and Boulder. So yeah, easily 5-0. Then they'll have their opportunity to climb up the rankings, right? And have a sexy number by their name. When their season really starts, they host the Wildcats. The Wildcats will give them a game. Um, I predict. I'm very high on the Wildcats. So I think that's their first real game on October 7th, I believe. And then there's the game that you circle every single year if you're a Trojans fan, especially if it's on the road, and that is they're going to have to travel to South Bend and see Freeman, Hartman, and the Fighting Irish. The Irish should be much improved. Maybe not much improved, but kind of a funky year for the Irish. They pulled off that upset against Clemson, but they also had that blemish against Stanford and Marshall. So yeah, really, really weird year. Freeman should have a better year, and USC might be slight favorites. They probably will be heading into that game undefeated, but that's going to be a huge test. And I definitely think Notre Dame could win. Um, their quarterback position was not good at all last year, and they've made a very good upgrade getting a veteran guy like Hartman. Um, Huge game for Caleb if he wants to go back to back on the Heisman. Um, and yeah, they probably won't be an underdog in South Bend, and then they're gonna host the Utes. I don't think they'll be an underdog in that game either, but they have to win. I stress that just barely. Riley has to beat the Utes, and he has to kind of look good doing it too for me to believe in him. I'm going to be honest. I'll go on the record saying this. I mean, I'm a little biased because of all the OU bullshit, right? Um, but I think Riley, I wouldn't say is criminally overrated, but he's definitely overrated. And I think Grinch is too. Um, I will need to see a lot from Alex Grinch for me to truly believe. But with Riley, I don't know if this style of football is conducive to winning. And it seems like when he goes against teams like their Utahs or the K States, or, they have a solid program that just goes out there, competes, and you know that they're going to be physical. So when he goes up against a team like that, he doesn't do that well. Um, really only had one competitive game in the playoff. Everything else was a joke. The Big 12 was much worse than his last year. They ended up losing Bedlam, not even playing in the conference championship. And I think that Rattler actually really wasn't that bad. He's been doing great at South Carolina. He is a quarterback whisperer. 3 Heismans. Could have had a fourth even with Jalen if it weren't for a man Joe Burrow. Um, he's absolutely incredible in terms of getting guys to the league and having good offensive production. I just don't see them winning. I don't see them winning the conference, really. I want to say the Ducks or the Beavers would beat them, or maybe the Utes will stop them from even getting there. I'm not the most high on USC. They could get that 10 though. Lincoln Riley's the type of guy to go 11-1 and to waltz through the season, and then all of a sudden he plays Dan Lanning again, and it's a different story. Which brings me to that game, November 11th. They're traveling to Eugene. Maybe they won't be underdogs at South Bend, but I think they will be underdogs in Eugene. So that's going to be a tough game. Second to last week of the season. And yeah, if they beat Oregon, then they're legit. If they beat Utah, Notre Dame, and Oregon, I I'll say Riley's legit, at least as far as the Pac-12 goes. They do get a host Washington. I think they'll win that game. Uh, but yeah, at Notre Dame, Utah, Oregon, Washington. Basically, they need to go 2-0 at Notre Dame and at Oregon, and then take care of business and beat Utah. And they could go undefeated if they do that. I could see them maybe walking through the schedule undefeated or one loss, but like I said before, I just don't trust them in the big games. I don't. We've seen it before, and I don't trust Grinch. You know, Utah diced them up bad. Uh, they did have that good showing against Oregon State, but there's no way they would have won that game without the turnovers. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. Is if they can replicate that turnover magic, then maybe Grinch does have some kind of secret where he gets the other team to give the ball to him. But I don't know. So USC has an easy schedule. Season doesn't start till Arizona, and then basically every game is hard other than when they play Cal. So yeah, we'll figure out who USC is. Basically, don't bother watching them until October. So yeah, that's my take on USC. Not a believer in Riley. I'm kind of pissed that they screwed the conference. Um, and yeah, let's move. Also within that region, we're moving down to the second tier, and this is like my kind of getting better tier. Um, First of all, with the tragedy of Bill McGovern, their former defensive coordinator, it's a real tragedy. He passed away in 2023, early in the year, so it's going to be a huge, huge loss for the program. And they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, Dietzen Lin. So we'll see how that goes. I think UCLA is a little slept on. Um, I thought Collins Lee was going to be the quarterback, But I mean, I guess they're going with Moore. And on the other hand, Carson Steele is a beast. He was a beast at Ball State. He rushed for so many yards, and I think he can keep doing it. UCLA might be a little slept on. Chip Kelly might be a little slept on. I know they're going to miss DTR, and it's going to be a big decision if they want to go with the experienced quarterback in Schlee or if they want to go with the hotshot freshman and Moore. I think they should go with Moore when you're looking at a conference when you got 5 teams who might be better than you this year, but you're going to be heading into the Big Ten, and if you give somebody big, like a big recruit with a lot of speed, some experience, some playing experience. He has an off season to put on more weight, get ready for the Big Ten. Maybe they can do that. So therefore, their over under is a little suspect to me. I just think the conference is really good. 8.5 seems like a number I don't want to touch. However, I do believe that Chip Kelly always has some magic in him. Um, their O line is going to be very new, and their quarterback is going to be new. Shout out the legend DTR, one of my favorite college players ever, and he's killing it on the Browns right now. So that's really cool. But it's going to be a Carson Steele led attack, I think, regardless. He's going to be the new Charbonnet, and I think he's going to kill it. I think UCLA is a great team that could definitely pull off a couple of upsets. They're not going to beat the Utes at Rice Eccles. Utah's going to be pissed. Um, They're not going to beat the Beavs, I don't think, either at Razor. Thought that's going to be a tough game. The Trojans, maybe they could upset something, pull off something, some rabbit from the hat type stuff. Uh, but I think this is a team that is going to be fun to watch because it's Chip Kelly. They're going to run the hell out of the ball, and they're going to maybe pull off a couple of upset. I could see them finish the season ranked, maybe in the lower 20s, but I think that's about the ceiling for them is 9 wins. I just think the Pac-12 is too difficult for them. I think inexperience up front is going to hurt them, and D8 and Lynn, their DC, he's coming from the NFL. I think he was on Philly with Chip. So we'll see how he does, but yeah, I mean, decently positive if you're a Bruin fan. I don't see a lot brewing, though, in terms of competing for a title like they looked like they were going to do last year. So, yeah, stay decent positive if you're a UCLA fan. They're slightly slept on, I believe. Um, Another team that I have been gassing up, um, that would be the Arizona Wildcats. I love Jaden DeLora. I know Wazoo people are pissed that he left, and I love their receiving room. They got Cowing, who was incredible last year. And they also have another McMillan, who was a freshman last year, but he had about a 700 yard season. I think I'm going to butcher his name. So, Tetoroa McMillan. And yeah, so basically their receiving room is pretty good. Definitely an offense that could surprise teams, starting with Mississippi State. I believe it's in Starkville. Um, yeah, it's in Starkville, right? So that's a game, week 2, where they play well. That would be pretty cool, pretty big for the program, and pretty big for their over 5. I don't expect them to win on the road, but they could give the Bulldogs some trouble. And I think that this over 5 is definitely a must hit. 5 games, that means they would not be bowl eligible. I just really don't see that happening. I definitely think they're going to beat the Sun Devils. I think they'll be better than Colorado. And yeah, I definitely think they could beat Mississippi State. And I think they could pull off an upset against whoever. So definitely think they're a team that should not be discredited or discounted. Delora is very close to that top pack of quarterback. Super fun guy to watch. He's got some legs, got an incredible arm, really makes some magic. So he's going to be a fun guy to watch. And if the cards line up right, maybe he could get an honorable mention for the quarterback position. I don't think he will just because it's too deep this year. Arizona, though, I'm very, very, very high on. especially considering their number is only 5. They played USC pretty tough last year, so that's definitely a plus. And Jed Fish is going to continue trying to build on his season. Um, so yeah, I'm big on Arizona, and another team that I'm kind of big on too, a little less because their number is higher, is the Wazoo Cougars. And like Arizona, they have a pretty big game week 2, September 9th. Wisconsin, with new coach Luke Fickell, is going to head into Pullman. And Wisconsin's ranked. I don't think they will be, or at least there's a chance they won't be after that game. Wazoo's pretty good, and Cam Ward can play. Um, Dickert has really been building pretty decent. I know he's a defensive guy, and that defense is really improving. There's a lot to love. I think they're way more disciplined. I mean, they were like, you could cut through them like cake when Leach was there. But now you've seen I mean, they were able to give the youth some trouble. I know that Rising was not available for that game, but I just think this is a quality team that a lot of people will be overlooking. And having the Badgers come there week 1 could be a big, big chance for them to make a statement win. And Ward, like Delora, is an overshadowed quarterback because of the high octane guys at the top of the conference, but he's also an absolute stud. He was great at Incarnate Ward. He made some awesome plays last year. There were some kind of stuff where it's like, okay, maybe he could mature more, but I think he will. And it's a game that, or it's another team that could pull off some upsets. I'm not going to favor them against all these upper echelon teams in the conference, and I probably wouldn't favor them against Wisconsin. But if Wisconsin was laying a number greater than 7, I would absolutely take the Cougars on that. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on Wazoo. Their defense will be very interesting to watch because that's kind of the identity that they've built, which is newer than what you would expect with kind of Mike Leach and what he ran. So yeah, I think that their defensive identity, and they could play spoiler. They got the OC. I believe he's new. Arbuckle from Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky actually has had really good offenses over the past few years. I know it's going to be kind of harder to play that style of offense with the defense they run. So we'll see how that works. But yeah, they'll be an interesting team to watch. I would lean towards taking that over just because they've made a bowl game for 7 years straight. CSU and Northern Colorado, they should win. And they play both Stanford and Cal, so they should win both of those too. They have Stanford, Cal, Colorado, and ASU all back to back starting October 28th. Those look like 4 wins. And 2 non-conference games, all they have to do is pull off 1 upset. They do get the Wildcats at home. I don't know if they're better than the Wildcats, but that'll be a revenge game. They definitely want to crack at Delora after he left them. So I think that 7 is definitely a play for sure. That 7 should be in play. I don't like it as much as Arizona's, but I definitely like it. I think 7 wins is probably what I would project them at. 8 seems a little high, but 6 seems low. So yeah, I like their defense, and I like their quarterback, and I like their coach, and that's always a good sign. And Pullman is one of the more difficult places to play too. So it's a game that I have highlighted for the Beavs as a trap game, and it is Washington. I know the Beavs have struggled there historically, big time. So Wazoo, I touched upon it in my Oregon State kind of Pac-12 debacle video. Don't be upset. The program's looking pretty good. It's really survived since Mike Leach, rest in peace, since he left to the SEC. It's really survived, I think, pretty well. And I think that they would do fine in the Mountain West with the Beavs. Yeah. So those are kind of my thoughts on Wazoo, Arizona, and UCLA. That kind of like middle echelon they could make some noise. but they're not going to make the conference title. And I'll be on the record saying that if y'all are going to smoke me come December. Okay. And then here are the teams that I don't really know a lot about. We're going to start with the Sun Devils and first year coach Dillingham. From what I did hear, it seems like Drew Pine did get injured. It's a hamstring. I don't know the significance. Um, Other than their quarterback room, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch a lot of ASU ball last year. I know Valladay was very significant for the offense for sure, so replacing him will be big. Um, they got a new offensive coordinator from Eastern Washington. And I know Eastern Washington. I actually, Dillingham, I believe, was the OC from Eastern Washington. You might have to check me on that. But they also got Brian Ward, who was the coordinator at Wazoo. So that's probably a pretty good hire because Wazoo's D really wasn't that bad considering the rest of the conference. So yeah, those are my thoughts on ASU. I don't know what's going to go on the quarterback room. Seems like a minor injury for Drew Pine. Drew Pine. He does have that Notre Dame experience. I still don't think he's the sixth best quarterback in the conference. So, not a team I'm expecting a lot from. Their number is 5. I would probably lean towards that under. They play Oklahoma State too, so that's probably a loss, even though they do host them. And yeah, it's kind of a program we're not going to know a lot about. You know, new coach, new coordinators, new quarterback. I definitely think that means take the under, especially when I'm that high on Arizona. So there's ASU. We're going with another coach, Dion, Colorado. The media loves him. I get it. Coach Prime. But this is what it is. Colorado football with Dion at the helm is an experiment. Okay? And Colorado is the perfect program that could take it. I know Dion was linked to some jobs in the SEC, but I don't think the SEC guys were really willing to take that risk. Colorado doesn't have that much to lose. I think hiring Dion was an integral part into getting them in the Big 12, honestly. Maybe they would have gotten in without him. I don't know. In terms on how I'm going to touch on the team, their number is 3.5. TCU game will be huge. We'll find out a lot about them, kind of though, because what I really am going to see with Colorado is like USC, this is a team that you should pay attention to probably during the second half of the year, other than that game against USC. I really want to see how Dion develops the guys. Maybe the transfer portal talent will start kicking in mid-season more. But we'll have to see if they can hang. This is another team that I don't know that much about. Because everybody's new, you know? I mean, I wish Lamonius Craig stayed, but he's gone. Sanders has a lot of love at the quarterback position. He seems great. I definitely wouldn't put him above Rising, Penix, Nix, Williams, maybe the Beavers quarterback, Ward, or Delora, honestly. So I still think he's at the lower end of the conference. But he'll be fun to watch. They got Hunter as well, who everyone thinks the world about. And they really have done the most noise in the transfer portal, and it's not that close. So, yeah, they're going to be interesting, but I don't think much of them. I would consider that under. And, yeah, they're going to have to. It'll be interesting seeing how they do against the Utes and seeing if that will be kind of a quasi rivalry. I don't know if the Utes will take them as seriously when they'll be playing BYU again. But yeah, if Colorado can kind of shape up and make it interesting against the Utes after Dion develops the guys, then I think they could do pretty well segueing into the Big 12. That's kind of another thing that I'll highlight for ASU too, is just segue into the Big 12. You're going to be playing against new guys, get your recruiting going, um, play some close games, but don't really trip about the record this year. Maybe Colorado will shock everyone. I'm not one of those guys circling them as potential upsets in any games. I think Dion will win maybe one significant game, but I definitely have Colorado at the lower end. So, yeah, we're going to find out, but this is an experiment. This is the Dion experiment. So, all right. And after that, we're going to move to a team that I profited off taking the under last year, I think at 5.5. And this is the California Golden Bears. All right. So at the helm is Wilcox, Justin Wilcox. He's been there for about 5 years, I want to say. And he is one coach, perhaps the only coach in the conference that I can say 100% is on the hot seat. And what we've seen is a decline. In 2019, Cal was 8-5, and they were probably ranked at one point. That's pretty good for Cal. 8-5, that's solid. If he was putting up years like that every other year, he would for sure keep his job, or even like once every few. But COVID, they went 1-3. Don't point the finger that much. 21, they went 5-7. 22, they went 4-8. So, pew, right? And 22 also featured a loss to Colorado, which was Colorado's only win. So Cal did not look good. Not a lot to love. They do have TCU transfer Sam Jackson the fifth. And he looks pretty good. He looks like he's fast. He looks like he's got potential. They have a transfer from NC State, Ben Finley, who's competing for that job as well. I do think that Sam Jackson the fifth will start. I think he's a sophomore, redshirt, so he should start. Maybe developing him will be key to wherever they're going to end up. Who knows? Wilcox got another offensive coordinator. I think he kind of had a clean of house last year, maybe after that Colorado game. So we'll see, but it looks like he's trying to save his ass, and I don't think he's going to. I said that Shaw was on the off seat. My take last year was Shaw would not make it through the season. I don't think Wilcox will make it through the season either. Unless he does something really significant, I doubt that Cal, without the Pac-12, is going to say, this is the guy for the future. Maybe it'll be like a mutual parting ways. But nah, Wilcox, I don't see it. They play Auburn week 2. Their number is 5. I'd take the under again. I think I already did, actually. I think I threw a little cheddar on the under again. They play Auburn. I know it's at home. That's probably a loss. Maybe they go 2-1 out of conference. And then when you look at the conference, I don't see them winning any games. Maybe they beat Stanford. That's it. So I think that under is a lock. If it were a number lower, maybe I said, okay, they could go 4-8 again. But they went 5-7 2 years ago. I went 5-7, 4-8. I think it could go 3-9. That's ceiling 4-8, floor 2-10. Not a team I'm projecting to do really anything at all. And I mean, Wilcox might be God mid-season. So yeah, slight positivity. Keep an eye on Sam Jackson the fifth. Maybe he'll do pretty well. Other than that, Cal is not a team I'm high on. Sorry. And that brings me to David Shawless, Stanford Cardinal. They have the lowest number at just 3. They're at the bottom of my conference. They hired Troy Taylor, I'm not the biggest fan of the hire. I know he did well in the FCS, but I mean, he was all right at Utah as a coordinator. Ludwig was clearly better. Um, and yeah, so here's what I have highlighted for them. Also, with that three, is basically what they're saying is, can they win a game in conference? They're not going to beat Notre Dame. I know they did last year, but they're not going to beat Notre Dame. They could beat Cal, maybe Colorado, and so yeah, are they going to beat Cal? That's kind of what we're looking at. Stanford's the dregs of this conference. I don't think anybody's going to argue me with that. I don't see anything that they could do other than pull off an upset. Maybe they'll beat Marcus Freeman again and everyone will be crazy. Everyone will go nuts. Maybe they'll beat Dion and prove he's a fraud or something. But this is a team I also know nothing about other than I know a little bit about Troy Taylor. Um, their quarterback is Ani Patu. Pardon my ignorance. I don't know much about him. Maybe keep an eye on him. Maybe they will have some kind of quarterback battle. But yeah, sorry for not really analyzing Cal, Stanford, and Arizona State. But I mean, I don't see much. They're at the bottom of the conference, and with a conference that is this loaded at the top, you're just gonna have teams with really low numbers at the bottom, and I don't think the no Cal schools can compete. Tempe, down in Tempe and in Boulder, I'd be a little more positive. They do have tough non-conference games, and they're introducing new coaches. So yeah, all in all, that's my summary of the Pac-12. You got your contenders, the Beavs, the Ducks, the Huskies, the Utes, and the Trojans. Quasi contenders, Bruins, Wildcats, Cougars, and then you got the Dregs, um, Sun Devils, Buffs, Cal, and Stanford. In terms of Heisman guys, anybody in the contenders could win. I think Oregon State and Utah, they're less likely to produce a Heisman just because they're more running the ball, defense oriented, physicality type. I think Rising does have a shot. DJ probably going to be more of a game manager. They'd have to be going undefeated for him to get any love. Bo Nix, severe Heisman candidate. Michael Penix as well. Williams probably won't win again, but who knows? And yeah, so that's kind of my breakdown for Heisman's. I think he got some of the best coaches for sure. Jonathan Smith, DeBoer, Lanning, obviously Whittingham, Riley, and Chip. Um, so it's going to be an absolutely awesome season in the Pac 12. Too bad it's the final one. But I mean, hey, we'll see. A lot could happen. For once, it seems like the media is willing to give them a slot in the playoff. And once again, that hasn't happened since Jake Browning and Chris Peterson and Jonathan Smith were all part of the Washington Huskies. Um, yeah, if you're a fan of one of those five teams at the top, I think maybe a playoff could happen. USC gets the most love, followed by Oregon in a close second. They get the media love. So definitely if they have one loss, they're more likely to get in than Washington, Utah, or definitely Oregon State. But with enough chaos, I think a one-loss Pac-12 team does have a door in. So that's awesome. All of those teams are ranked. UCLA could end up being ranked, or Arizona or Wazoo. So it's going to be a great year to cover the Pac-12. You must stay up and watch these late games because they're absolutely going to be insane. And that's when these teams could pull off upsets. That's what I'm saying. You really don't know what happens after dark. It's really a whole different ball game. You've seen some of the craziest football on those late night Saturday games. So please, if you're a fan, stay up. These conference has incredible quarterbacks, incredible talent, and the stakes are as high as ever, especially for teams like the Beavs and the Cougars. You know, everybody wants to be the final Pac-12 championship. Pac-12 champion. So yeah, appreciate the love. I'll get more conference breakdowns. I'll do all the Power Fives and then kind of group. Um, I'll highlight some teams who I think will be good. Obviously, Boise. And yeah, finally, my one over I'm definitely going to take amongst these Pac 12 teams is the Beavs. I know I'm biased. Arizona's another one I'd consider, and Wazoo for sure. So for gambling perspectives, that's what I'd take. Unders, Cal, I'm taking it again. ASU, I'd consider. Stanford, I really would consider. Colorado, I'll give Dion the benefit of the doubt. USC, I just think I'm not going to doubt Riley in the regular season for sure. I think they could hit that number. And then, yeah, Washington, maybe that under, but I think all these Pac-12 teams are really good. So I wouldn't bet against any of them other than Cal. So, yep. All right. This is Culver Jones signing off with the CFBAD, and I'll be back with more content for y'all. Much love. Peace.